So, welcome to this class on the beginning of the Enlightenment, specifically with reference to France. We'll be talking about the French Revolution. In the previous class, we had already seen the causes that led to the French Revolution. So, that was the time, the period of what we call as the Enlightenment. So, now there had to be a beginning somewhere. These revolutions, enlightenment, things like this don't happen on a fine morning or overnight. So the process happens over a long period of time. So when you talk about this idea of change, it did not happen overnight. So right at the beginning, there were no rebellious masses on the street at first. There were no strikes or things like that. So the whole thing was simmering for a long time, and then slowly it led to the change. So, where did this come from? These ideas, it came from many directions, it came from many places. So, there was the slow and percolating effect of ideas. For any revolution to happen, you need to have some kind of an idea that would sustain the whole movement and would energize the whole people. And when you think about the French Revolution, we need to keep certain things in mind. For instance, most of these thinkers who are behind uh, this change, they were very conservative. Conservative, as in they were very traditional in their approach, and they did support monarchy. It was not that they had any problem with the king or the whole imperial kind of arrangement that was there. So they were okay with that. But then they really did not like one thing. The reaction was against the abuse of uncontrolled power that was made by these rulers and the religious heads. So when this whole movement, when this whole idea began, or when the society started churning, they had no idea of this violent uprooting of the political structure. That was not there in their mind. That was not the idea. They did not want a 360-degree change or from the empire onto the republic. They did not want all that. So they didn't have any problem with the monarchy. But then they had a problem with this abuse of power, this uncontrolled power that was there in the hands of the kings and the religious heads. They did not agree with that. So this change, it was there in the air for some time. So they got ideas from the movements in America, the American Declaration of Independence, and the Glorious Revolution in England. So the winds of change was blowing all over America, England. So ideas are such that you cannot keep that restricted to a particular country or within borders. They spread. So these ideas spread from these places to France as well. So this led to a demand for rationality and for radical reform. So people were becoming unhappy with their lot and they wanted things to change. So now, if you're looking at the trajectory of the Enlightenment, trajectory as in the route map, the path of the Enlightenment, this started with an indictment of excesses and corruption that was there in the French court. We'd already seen how the rulers were really power hungry, licentious. They were abusing the people, and the people belonging to the third estate, they had to pay all the taxes. They had to pick the tab of this luxurious life that is led by people belonging to the first two estates. So it was an indictment of these excesses of power and corruption. And then this movement was towards questioning the abuse of power, towards an affirmation of the golden, you could say, the golden motto of this whole movement: liberty, equality, and fraternity. They wanted all these things. And the driving force behind this idea, this change, were the philosophers, essayists, poets, and scientists. They lent ideas with their learning and their wisdom, and the publications from these people, they actually created an impetus to the movement. And so you can see there was a slow movement towards reason, till then there was a lot of superstitious beliefs, uh, belief in the divine right of kings, things like that, which had been followed for generations and generations, and they were not questioned at all till then. But now people started questioning that, and they wanted to see and approach everything um, through reason. So, trampling on prejudice, tradition, universal consent, authority, in a way, all that enslaves most minds were challenged. All these things were challenged. So this is the idea of philosophy, a new branch of idea that was doubtful about metaphysical speculation. So earlier they used to have all these grand philosophical ideas, believe, everything rooted and supported by the uh, spiritual doctrines put forward by the church, and these doctrines and teachings were self-serving the interests of the ruling upper class, that is the kings as well as the clergy. But now people started questioning that. So they were coming out of those dark ages. And another underlying idea that really gave momentum to the whole process was this idea of the human dignity, idea of this individual human being. So people started giving more importance to the individual and how an individual is important. So people started valuing human dignity like never before. Earlier, what was given importance? Your status, your position, things like that were given importance. But now each and every one of them were called upon by these philosophers and these essays and writers to think about themselves, to examine their self-worth. So they started giving a lot of importance to human dignity. So there was this belief that they can take charge of their own destiny. So no matter where you are born or to which family you are born, doesn't matter, as long as you can work your way out of it, that you can challenge, you can question. So it was kind of a liberation of the human mind, which till then was suppressed by the political structures, also the religious structures. But now they were slowly breaking free from these shackles. So using this, they could construct the understanding of their universe. So human beings, they started believing that they could be masters of their own destiny. So human being is worthy of admiration, and then reason was the supreme force behind everything. So they started worshipping this idea of reason. So there was this new system of epistemology by John Locke that said that all our knowledge comes from experience. Epistemology is again the study of knowledge. So earlier everything was biblical, and things like the divine right of the king and whatever was said by the priest had to be taken at face value. But now with people like John Locke, he started writing arguments in favor of human reason and all knowledge, everything comes from experience, according to John Locke. So empiricism becomes a very very important method of studying things. So reason was used to weigh and judge the worth of traditional beliefs and institutions. So they started questioning things till then were not questioned and taken for granted. So now everything was being questioned. Now, reason was considered as the supreme faculty. So, reasoning made criticism the most prestigious branch among the philosophers. Now, philosophers are people who were into philosophizing, reasoning, and giving new ideas. So, it's a French term, we call them philosophers. So, Diderot, he says everything must be examined, everything must be shaken up without exception and without circumspection. So this becomes something like a clarion call, a kind of a motto with which these people went about questioning and deconstructing and pulling apart everything that was accepted as universal truth. So they were very keen to rewrite history. So many treatises, encyclopedia, things like that were written and rewritten. And the philosophies, they did not instigate any riot, but then they created a favorable intellectual environment for the revolt. So later, when you talk about the French Revolution that would happen, then you have all the people on the street, all that came about because of the contribution of these philosophers, the thinkers, the poets, and the writers. Now, empiricism and rationalism, they were the cornerstones on which this whole movement was um, supported. So, the philosophy of empiricism was seen as the pride of human achievement. The concept of progress was based on the degree of civilization in accordance with the rational view of the world. So the followers, the proponents, they believed that everything could be explained and understood by empiricism and rationalism. Rationalism as in making use of your rational judgment. So empiricism is, again, it's a scientific method, a methodology wherein if you want to conclude something or if you want to say something as a law, you need to have n number of proofs. So when you see the same thing happening again and again and again, that is kind of, you deduct something. You deduct and then you arrive at a conclusion. So seeing, touching, experimenting, all these things became, uh, you could say, the foundation of the thought process, which till that time was not at all there. People blindly believed, or people were made to believe whatever was told by the people in authority and power. But now everything was being shaken, everything was being dismantled, and questions were raised about every institution, every belief, every value system. And here we have a list of some of the major philosophers or the thinkers. You have Montesquieu. He had written The Spirit of Laws. We'll be looking at all these people in detail in the coming classes and their contribution. And we have Denis Diderot. He was in charge of this writing this encyclopedia, which he called the encyclopedia. So, which encyclopedia which encapsulates all that enlightenment stood for. So, it was a collaborative work wherein people came together and then they wrote whatever was available at that time. So all known knowledge was put down in the form of this encyclopedia. There was another um, philosopher, that is David Hume from Scotland. He wrote the Treatise of Human Nature, Political Discourses and Essays, treatises, and he denounced uh, this belief in this divine designer, as in, the belief in divinity, the belief in God, things like that. So he denounced all that. So his idea was to prove that everything is empirical and whatever is there to be known is available here for us. So there are no notions, or there are no things like God and divinity and things like that. Now Voltaire, he has written works like Philosophical Letters on the English. He also contributed to Diderot's Encyclopedia. He has written other works like Zaire and Candide. We'll be looking in detail all these works and what they are about. And Rousseau is very famous for some of his lines wherein he says that man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains, everywhere he is in shackles. He speaks about education. He gives us this idea about what education should be and what it should be achieving. So this particular work, Emile, or on education, is his philosophy based on what he thinks about education. And then he has written other novels also: Julie, Ola Novel, Heloy, then Du Contrat Social, Principe du Droit Politique. Then you have Immanuel Kant. He has written three critiques: the critique of pure reason, the critique of practical reason, and the critique of judgment. So here, in a nutshell, we have gone through some of the major names, major philosophers who contributed to the Enlightenment, which led to the French Revolution.